Your first major essay assignment in this class is a memoir. And in the first few years that I taught this class, this creative nonfiction class, the memoirs, I would say, be creative, feel free to bring in photos or, play around with form and everything. And invariably, all the submissions would just be traditional text in a document memoir. And it would feel a lot like reading narrative essays that I might assign, for example, in like a freshman comp class, where it was sort of like, this thing happened to me once, and then at the end of the essay, it's like, and here's the moral of the story. Here's how I changed or what I learned from it, which is fine. But, it's not particularly creative. And mostly those essays would end with things, like, and I learned that life is precious and life is fragile. And guess what? We, the readers, we know that already. So in a class like this, which is like upper level and like creative, the word actually in the title of the course, I really want to push you in this first assignment. You're welcome. I really want to push you to do something that's not strictly telling a story from your life and then trying to wring some meaning from it. I want to push you to do something creative, which seems counter to the concept of creativity, doesn't it? Like you think that creativity should just burble up within you and just happen. But as I found over the years, it doesn't. So guess what? We're going to require creativity in this first essay. And so you're going to have two choices. One of them I will explain in more detail in just a moment after the edit. And it will be to use a repetitive form to create a series of vignettes. So like short paragraphs, short clusters of sentences, but each little vignette, each little cluster will start with the same word or words that you get to choose. So you will perhaps tell 10 or more you will collect moments from your life. So you are still telling a personal life kind of story, but it maybe will be like, I'm just going to use the number 10. It will be like 10 vignettes that all start in exactly the same way. So let's just say, for example, you're going to start with today. And then you're going to start with today, but you're going to tell 10 different today moments from throughout your life that you have selected because they thematically have something in common. So in the example that will follow this, we have a daughter who is trying to depict her father increasing in his dementia by a series of vignettes that are like today, and then it'll be something she and her father did. There's also another section in the same book that I'm going to draw the example from, where she starts a lot of things with like in the present, because a therapist had told her to just try and stay in the present with her father. So it would be like, in the present, we this. So you can start yours with any phrase or words you choose. Maybe it's just going to be the same pronoun over and over. Maybe it's going to be he something, because you are writing something about your son. You are trying to capture something about his personality in the early years of his life. He does this, this, and this. He does this, this, and this. But each little vignette will tell a quick blip, cross-section, excised moment of a bigger story about whatever you've chosen. And but the important thing is you're going to use this tool of repetition and this other tool of short vignettes. Because sometimes when you sit down to write the full essay, you're like, how many pages do I have to fill? Can I come up with enough stuff to say to fill all the pages? And you get so kind of caught up in the idea of like, I have to fully develop this important big story that it's hard to even want to sit down and start. So we're going to have you just do short little vignettes, and they will accumulate together into you actually telling a story about something. So that's your first choice, is you can choose like a phrase or a word that you will use with repetition for a series of vignettes, okay? So we're just asking you to play around form a little bit that way. Your second choice, if you don't like that first one, after I explain it more after the edit, your second choice is going to be that you can tell a life story. And again, it can be a collection of quick little blip moments that somehow add up to you revealing something. You can tell a story by bringing in the concept or the actual thing, something from the physical world. So there's an example I've given elsewhere in the class of like some creative nonfiction might try and capture a relationship, let's say with a grandmother, by telling that story through recipes from grandma's recipe box. Good old-fashioned recipe box in grandma's kitchen, and she would pull out those little index cards, and they would have her recipe for chili con carne or whatever. And so you could actually tell the story. Maybe you made things with grandma. Maybe you remember having that food at her house, that kind of thing. Maybe it was served at her funeral. So you could tell a story where you do a series of like recipe index cards. How you choose to present that when you turn it in is you might just do JPEGs of the recipe cards you've created. You're going to have to figure out how to submit it to me somehow. My husband is a biker. He bike commutes every day, 365 that he's on his bike. Don't put him in a car. And so he maybe for this would be like, I'm going to try and structure some memoir story, maybe a series of little moments, but I'm going to try and bring them into the structure of a bike. There's a seat. I don't know my bike all that well. There's wheels, there's spokes, there's spokes, there's a hub, there's handlebar, so he physically, maybe what if he wanted to sketch a picture of a bike or maybe find a picture that he brings into a document, and then he could sort of break it down and be like, the spokes of my story are this, the hub is this. And maybe he would type up a little paragraph of a vignette, a story, and he would kind of like put that into near the tire, the wheel of his bike. And he would just, put an arrow pointing to it. And then he'd have a little part of the story. And maybe these would all be little vignettes of things that have happened to him while he's out biking in the world. Because he comes home from his daily commute and he always has stories of weirdos on the lake walk, or someone he comes across who needs help and he stops and helps them. So he could tell a series of stories about himself biking. And he could arrange them visually around the sort of physical visual of his bike. So for you, if you want to do this, like I'm going to try and connect my storytelling to something that is like from the physical world, look around your house. Did you get wildly into houseplants during the pandemic and now you have like 80 of them? What if you chose your favorite, let's just say 10 houseplants, and you told a story about growth, nurturing, watering, perhaps of yourself during the pandemic, but you somehow like used pictures of your houseplants and you used each one of those as a basis for the little vignette, little story. So there might be something, maybe you go through your sweater collection and you choose like each one of these sweaters, like I was wearing when I first met my boyfriend, I was wearing during our first fight, this sweater. When we broke up the first time, I was wearing this sweater. When we broke up the 7th time, I was wearing this sweater. So you could tell a story of a relationship, a romantic relationship through your sweater collection. So I want you to find like a physical object or something, something that can be touched in the world, even though when you submit it in the class, it will probably just be a visual image, and figure out your storytelling based around the physical object you are choosing. I could give you lots more examples. You're probably tired of watching this already. So I will next show you the example of the sort of repeated phrase or word starting vignettes and how that can add up into something like a story. So go refresh your tea and settle in for the rest of this. Okay, just to give you some sense of what I'm talking about with your choice for this first essay of using a repetition. So a word or a phrase that you use over and over as you start various vignettes. All of these vignettes should work together to create a story of sorts. And I know it can be really hard to detach from traditional storytelling where you're used to sort of like some exposition, some rising action, and then eventually like a climax and a resolution, a denouement. Like there's a certain kind of storytelling we're used to, and it can be a little jarring to realize that you can tell stories in creative and different ways. And of course, I am trying to legislate your creativity with this assignment by pushing you. So let's look at what we have here, but you should think to yourself sort of like, is there a person or something in my life or a theme or that I would like to focus on? for this first essay. And that could help determine what your phrase or words of repetition are. What if I was going to write about my daughter? So she was a cross country runner in high school and in college. And then she was someone who she graduated high school early, worked a couple jobs so that she could take herself and travel alone for 3 months. So she wanted to go abroad by herself and figure things out. So there's a way that this kid of mine is a runner, right? Both in a very literal and a figurative sense. So I could write, sort of a personal essay, kind of a memoir thing about my daughter. And the phrase that I would use over and over could be, she runs. And my first vignette could be the story of a cross-country meet. She runs past me on the Proctor golf course, and like tell that little story of that day. And I could keep telling little stories about my daughter that start with the word she runs. And then I, explore all the different aspects of her where there's like sort of running involved. All right. In front of you, you have an excerpt. I have to admit, I left out a few pages because they didn't have the pertinent form I was looking for. But it's, there's a novel called Goodbye Vitamin, and it's not strictly fiction. It's a little blend, I think, of nonfiction and fiction. And the author is Rachel Kong. So most of the book is just the usual kind of storytelling in chapters. And then suddenly around page like 160-ish, Rachel Kong decides to start switching into this kind of repetition. Her father has dementia, and he is slowly failing. She herself is at a point in her life where she's trying to figure, like, who am I? What am I doing? Right now, I guess I'm helping take care of my dad, right? So we see that she uses this word today over and over and over on these pages. I'm not going to sit here and read these aloud. I will put the PDF on the content page so that you can review it or have it open when you are working on your own. But just look at how she uses the word today. So today, Dad says about the last sizes of lumber he needs. Could you write it all down so I won't forget? Write it all down is what he says. Okay, Dad, I say, and do. And then you'll notice that there are little bits of elaboration or detail that don't start with today. Fair game, great. But then today I cooked salmon and you said it was esculent. Today you're wearing your old glasses with the old prescription. Then we're on another page. Today you tried that old trick you used to do. And then she goes into how he used to open beer bottles. And then today you said, and today you sliced into an onion that looked like Batman. Today you said the sunshine was a stick of butter. And then we have a tonight that kind of elaborates on that previous one. Today you wandered to the park and I found you. And this one you can see as I scroll here that she really develops it into like a real story of that moment. So your little vignettes, I'm not talking like they all have to be a sentence. I'm saying just start it with your repeated word or phrase. And then it could be a paragraph or two that tells that little story. But just keep in mind you're going to be shooting for roughly 10 vignettes that start with the word or phrase you have chosen. So how much you want to develop those is up to you and what you feel like you have to say. So this one, we're seeing here kind of an extended development. As we go along, today you washed your shoelaces. Today you spoon-fed the neighbor's cat tuna from a can. And then she tells a little bit of something else. Today I cooked clams. Today you disappeared again. And then we hear more about that as you keep reading here. Today Mom brought home a heavy melon. Today you told me that the Santa Ana wins. And then again, more detail, little explanation. Today you said, did you know that we share 50% of our DNA with bananas? Today you, Linus, and I finished painting the patio. Today I cooked you spaghetti. And then we have but today you said, so see how she's using this word, this repeated word. Today we drove to the beach. And then there's the story of that. Today Theo came to pick you up. Today you asked about my job at the hospital. And then there's more about that explaining. Today you were sitting in front of the computer. And we get more about that. A few paragraphs. You might also notice that the author is using every now and then 3 dots in the middle. You could use a different symbol, but this kind of glyph, this kind of separating technique is a good thing to play around with in creative nonfiction, where you're sort of showing the passage of time or the segmenting of a story. So let's say you're going to write 10 little vignettes, and do the repeating kind of thing, like she runs and I tell a story. She runs and I tell a story of my daughter. She runs. In between each one, I might want to put the 3 dots, or maybe I'm feeling fancy and I'll put a fleur de lis. So you can see here that like there's some expansion on one story, but then we have today we marked handles and the light switches with red nail polish because people with dementia, the depth perception of things gets thrown off a little bit. So it's hard sometimes to tell, so if you change colors, who knew? Today we separated everyone's dark and white clothes. Today you held your open hand out and I shook the pills into it. And then today, buying refills of vitamins, I bought 2 of each type. So from now on, I can take them with you. So we see this sweet story of father and daughter, right? Today, we cooked dinner. Today, I applied for sonography certification. Today, I found an almond. Today, I looked glum. Today, we ate grapes, and we get the little story of it. Today, we went for a run together. Today, Theo came over. Today, at the store, you stole a chicken. Today, we went to the Boomers. Today, we went to the pumpkin patch. And then today I found an avocado skin on the dish rack like a drying dish. So you can just see that this goes on for like 15, 16 pages in this book. This repeated use, this repetition that is building. Like when it all is accumulated together, it creates the story of a father and a daughter navigating a difficult time, the time of the father's cognitive demise. They're navigating it together. So your challenge, if you decide to go with this option, will be to figure out like, what is it I want to tell a story about? And what word or phrase do I want to use repeatedly to start each of the little vignettes that I'm going to craft to tell this story?